Welcome back to the PGA Tour. It has been quite some time since we've had a PGA Tour event. Took a whole week off for the Olympics, where my guy Xander Schauffele went out and got it done. Won the gold medal. Rory Sabatini finishing second to get silver after a 61 on Sunday. And CT Pan, I always want to say CT Pan. I still say it. I think it's CT Pan. I learned a lot, but uh, with that 7 golfer playoff coming in with the bronze. But that's in the past. We're moving on to the WGC FedEx St. Jude Invitational. So welcome on in to the FanDuel PGA Q&A for this week. I'm your host, Brandon Gdula. I'm the managing editor over at numberFire.com. I'll be talking about the field, the betting odds on FanDuel Sportsbook, the daily fantasy slate on FanDuel, my win simulations, and whatever else you want, because this is a Q&A format. So hit up the comment section on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Twitch if you have questions for this week's event. Possibly have some questions about the women's Olympic event kicking off tonight as well. I did a podcast on that, short one, about 20 minutes long. I have some articles up on numberFire as well, but I'm very excited to see them play the same course that we saw the men play last week. So let's dig in to this field on FanDuel Sportsbook, looking at the very top of things with Brooks Koepka at 11-1 to win. Colin Morikawa 12-1, Xander Schauffele, Jordan Spieth both 14-1. Justin Thomas, the defending champ here, when he notably lost strokes putting and still won, which is wild. 16-1. Rory McIlroy kind of doing some things without the hat at the Olympics was pretty impressive. 18-1, same as Dustin Johnson. Daniel Berger, a 2-time winner at this course, not specifically this event, not since the WGC event, but has 2 wins here in 2016 and 2017 at 22-1. Same as Victor Hovland, Louis Oosthuizen, and Patrick Cantlay. So you get the idea, right? Like, we have a lot of great names in this field because it's a WGC. And that is something that should drive all of our decisions for this week, whether it's a bet. So someone like Brooks sets up well, has historically played well here, but he's got to beat out a lot of guys at 11-1 odds. And with Brooks specifically, he's very hard to put into a model because he doesn't always play the same game week after week. He can have weeks where he is engaged and weeks where he's not. I still like him as a FanDuel play. I still like him honestly as a bet, even though my model hates it, because I don't make too many manual adjustments for Brooks or for anybody for that matter. If I did, Brooks would probably rate out pretty well. I would have him close to the favorite based on what I would expect subjectively, but based on the objective data, a little bit overvalued. But again, elite field, pretty deep field, and on FanDuel historically, that means we're going to see in a no-cut event the optimal lineup spend a little bit more than we typically see in a full field event with a cut. We're going to see the winner come from a higher portion of the salary pool than what's average for a full field event. And so that kind of says we need a little bit more balance in our lineups, despite the fact that it is a no-cut event. Guys effectively do miss the cut at no-cut events by finishing, significantly over par, even at or around par. So guys like John Rahm last year, Joaquin Niemann, Max Homa, Keegan Bradley, Mark Leishman, Matthew Wolff. Yes, they played out all 4 rounds, but this is as damning as a missed cut. So, you're going to have the urge to want to save salary so that you can go ahead and roster Brooks, roster Jordan Spieth, whoever it is that's your favorite for this week. But just bear in mind that that's not really how things work, even in a no-cut event. So again, if you have any questions, hit up the YouTube chat, Facebook, Twitter, or Twitch, and I will get to those. But for now, I'm going to keep breaking down the course itself, TPC Southwind. I always like to start with data golf for just about, all of the historical event data, all of the course fit data. And I like to look at this tool here. what drives variation in scoring, because this shows how golfers tend to separate. What stats separate the golfers? Is it that they, have better iron play, better putting, and that's kind of what gets them out ahead, gets them away from the pack? Well, at TPC Southwind, we got to be careful because this is a full event average, and this event has been at different courses. So I'm going to show some other stuff here too. But in 2020, it was iron play with a de-emphasis on driver and a de-emphasis on the putter, which is kind of rare to see any course show a little bit of a de-emphasis with the putter. And again, with it being rare to see last year because JT won with negative strokes gained putting. The year prior, putting actually outperformed the tour average by a pretty good margin there, and irons sort of fell off. So it's kind of contradictory there. But if you're digging back into like a lot of history for TPC Southwind, you'll want to look at the FedEx St. Jude Classic as well, which is at TPC Southwind in 2018 and earlier. Dustin Johnson won that, dominated in 2018. That year, we saw the irons really stand out, not so much the putting, which typically would imply that, the winners, the guys at the very top, had really good iron play, and that's what we see here. Lots of good iron play, not necessarily putting. But does that sort of stick around for those prior years as well? Well, sort of, for the most part. Iron play very important here, and occasionally drivers more important, occasionally drivers less important. Putting can kind of come and go, but the one constant really is iron play, and that is just the key stat for me again this week. It pretty much always is, but if you look here at the tour averages, tee to green, iron play is just the most important stat for separating. It's more important than around the green and off the tee combined. So for this week and for all week, strokes gained approach is the number one stat. Strokes gained around the green, I think, is at least something that we can consider if we're going to de-emphasize driver. And I'll show why I think we can de-emphasize driver a little bit in just 1 second. But if we're going to de-emphasize driver, possibly putter, then that has to put a natural boost on the wedges. But speaking of that driver, and how we're going to factor it in, looking at this course fit tool from Data Golf as well, we can see that driving distance is less important here than it is at your average PGA Tour course, kind of substantially so, which, anytime you have that increases variance because the shorter hitters can be at times sort of quote unquote disqualified from contention. That's not going to be the case this week. So with that in mind, strokes gained off the tee, basically disproportionately values distance over fairways hit. So anytime we get that, I think we can go against strokes gained off the tee to some degree. So that's why I'm looking more at the wedge play than typical this week, because it does outperform just barely the PGA Tour average in terms of importance. But we're seeing a little bit of a de-emphasis on driver, an added emphasis on irons more than usual even. Putting about the same, and so around the green gets a little bit of a boost there. So my key stats for the week: strokes gained approach number 1, strokes gained around the green kind of number 2, but not something that I'm going to weight in super heavily. Birdie or better rate gained, which is kind of obvious, but in a no-cut event, it's important to remember that golfers are going to tie and get the same amount of finishing points for their finishing bonus, but if a golfer has substantially more birdies and bogeys to get to that same total score, that golfer is going to make way more fantasy points over the course of 4 rounds than someone who is much more par heavy. So being able to break par matters every week, but I think especially matters in a no-cut event where there's no real downside for making a bogey, aside from sliding down the leaderboard a bit, so long as you can bounce back with that birdie. And a birdie and bogey is worth more points than 2 pars on FanDuel. Greens are Bermuda for this week if you want to dig into putting splits, but kind of those are my key stats. I'm going to look a little bit past driving and look at that iron wedge play, putter play, which kind of screams Jordan Spieth for me. Again, if you have any questions, hit up the YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Twitch chat, and I will be happy to go over them. So I think we know what to expect from the course. I'm going to jump over to my spreadsheet here. Look at the top of the field. From a salary standpoint, these are some of the most important stats that I'm looking at this week. Also, just kind of all of the strokes gain stats as usual. These strokes gain stats come from my database, which adjusts for field strength, and it also waits for recency. So that's why they're not going to look exactly the same as you would if you just pull up pgatour.com and look at the season. These do account for field strength and also, again, that recency. So I think it's a bit of an added element to the data that we typically would be looking at. So we've got Brooks Koepka as the favorite at 11-1 and the highest salaried golfer at 12,200. And he's rating out only 3.1% likely for me to win. It's not great. It's not terrible. It's a pretty flat structure this week in terms of the win odds in my simulations, just because of how the field sort of breaks out and is kind of relatively even at the top. So I can't really nitpick Brooks at all, honestly. The short game's not as good as it could be, but we know that what he really does best is be really good tee to green. We know that the wedges can be there. We know his putter can get really hot, even though it hasn't quite been super hot lately. He is particularly good on Bermuda, getting about 0.3 strokes putting over the past 100 rounds on that surface, according to data from Fantasy National. That puts him in the 71st percentile in this smaller field, but that's still very viable, especially compared to someone like Colin Morikawa, who has just not been a good Bermuda putter in his career. His putting splits are going to be a bit of a nightmare until they start to stabilize more toward his numbers since he changed his putting grip. But Morikawa definitely more volatile because of the putter than you would typically like to see for someone at a salary of 12,000. Xander, I mean, it's pretty much all green aside from the fairways, which are still above average. The only issue that you can make for Xander is that he just won the gold medal. He's traveling back, and again, he also just won the gold medal, so he might not be totally locked in. And typically, we would like Xander at a no-cut event because that's where he thrives. I'm not particularly in on Xander, and for anyone who doesn't know, that's saying a lot because I'm in on Xander all the time because I look at data, and his data looks like this always. So probably just avoiding Xander for this week. And kind of going more toward Jordan Spieth for a little bit of salary savings, 11,700. Again, if we're de-emphasizing or we're okay de-emphasizing driving stats, then a lot points to Spieth because he does have that red flag. So he's 25th percentile or worse in strokes gained off the tee with those adjustments for field strength and recency. But everything else is good. 80th percentile approach, 92nd percentile around the green. The putting's not quite where you would expect for Spieth, but and Bermuda's not necessarily his best surface, but there's still a lot to like for Spieth. And then there's DJ, who I think probably won't get a whole lot of buzz because his form is quote unquote bad, but that's a little bit of it's not quite fair. He's also a two-time winner at this course, so that might bump him back up, especially with all of these guys, or a lot of these guys at the top traveling back from the Olympics. So I think DJ is a great tournament pivot. He's one of my favorite plays, but my building blocks are going to actually be Brooks and Spieth among these top five. Question from Salvator on YouTube: top plays 9,000 to 9,900. Hopefully you're not too set on those salary buckets because I don't love a lot of golfers in that range. And two of my favorite are just above that with Patrick Reed, Matthew Fitzpatrick at 10-1 and 10,000. But if you want me to be more specific, then it's a little bit easier because we have Jason Kokrak, Harris English, and Corey Connors. So I'll pull up Reed, Fitz, Connors, English, Kokrak, if I can remember all that. Did them out of order there at the end, but that'll be all right because their salaries are only $100 different for Kokrak and English, but these are kind of the guys that I'm honing in on in this range. For me, Reed's really intriguing because he disappointed at the Olympics. So he has that travel. He's been traveling a lot, which probably played part into why he wasn't quite himself. But you can really make a case for Reed being undersalaried, underappreciated here at 10,100. Great short game, which is what we know from Reed, but not the worst birdie maker either. 62nd percentile in this field. Like, that's not bad. And we've seen him, he's got multiple wins in small field events. He has at least one WGC win off the top of my head. He won in Mexico. I think Reed's really intriguing. I think Matt Fitzpatrick as well, but he does fall right outside that. So I'm going to focus in on Kokrak, Connors, and English because I think they are all to some degree, you can make the case undersalaried. Connors does. He did play at the Olympics, but elite ball striker, 88th percentile off the tee, 91st percentile approach. I would imagine in this field, only like Xander can say that he's at least 88th percentile in both of those. Don't quote me on that, but I would imagine that's the case. It's the short game that's the concern for him. But again, if we don't need distance, if putting isn't always the most important stat at TPC Southwind, again, JT got that win, losing strokes putting. I'm not saying Connors is going to win, but he has like that high end upside in his potential because he's such a good ball striker. And also, probably one of the main reasons we see approach be so important at TPC Southwind is that these are some of the smallest greens on tour. Only Pebble Beach and Harbor Town have smaller average green sizes among courses on the typical PGA Tour rotation than TPC Southwind. So, like, anytime you see elite iron play, that should draw your attention. And that's what we get with Connors. And we don't have that quite so much with Kokrak or English, but it's definitely good. At least field average or better for both of these guys. And English, really good short game right now. Really good on Bermuda. And then Kokrak, better iron play. Really good off the tee because of that distance. But the putting for him has been quite strong as well. So I would say most specifically in the thanks Cal for producer Cal adjusting the top plays from 9,000 to 10,100, but between 99 and 9,000, I think the better plays come from the lower salary tier there with Connors, Kokrak, and English. Mr. Jackie Moon just stopping by to say hey to you and Jim if he's not. So Jim's not going to be here, actually. It's going to be Tom Vecchio. So stick around at 4. Tom will come on and answer all of your MLB questions for tonight. Question from Forrest on Facebook. How are the New York Yankees doing? Forrest, buddy, I got no idea. You have to ask Tom because baseball is outside of my expertise. All right. So I think that overall, that middle tier is pretty barren, but I think it's a really, I know this view is like really hard to hone in on. This is what I'm looking at most of the week, but I think here I'll sort it by just that range. Like there are some names highlighted here, like Webb and Tyrrell Hatton get like the maybe sort of. Yes, Jim is happy, healthy, and alive. I've just heard from him a few minutes ago, so Jim's good to go. But this tier, maybe not. I mean, Webb Simpson's health could be like, I don't know if he's fully healthy. I think he's happy. I know he's alive. But Webb Simpson was kind of dealing with some injuries, hasn't been quite himself. Tyrrell Hatton as well. I mean, these guys rate out like top 12. You could make the case that you just build lineups around this range and you would build a lineup where you would feel like you could hit the winner out of all 6 of your golfers. That is a must-have feeling in a WGC event. Yeah, there will be a temptation to go down and roster golfers in the 7,000 range, the 8,000 range which I think is more viable, the 8,000 range. I'll show some guys there, but you could realistically just kind of hover in this range. I just find myself with a lack of options, and I don't like to get overexposed to golfers who I do have question marks about. Um, Neiman, Answer, Cam Smith, Shane Lowry, they all played in the Olympics. I know Corey Connors did, but his salary is a little bit lower, and his ball striking is really good. Um, so I'm kind of just like out on most of that 9,000 range. Let me pull up the 8,000 range ish. There are a few guys below that who I lumped in here. I went down to Ryan Palmer. Um, so Kokrak, I discussed. Sung Ji Im, I can't get there this week after he had a disappointing showing at the Olympics. And I only say this because it was important for him. If he had medaled, he would have he wouldn't have had to serve his mandatory 2 years of military service in South Korea. So like he skipped the Open for that. Didn't really put it together. I don't really want to bounce or bank on a bounce back from him this week. I think we can kind of go elsewhere, even in a low salary range. Will Zalatoris, I mean, you could easily make the case that he's undersalaried. However, he did withdraw from the Open with a back injury. So what's his health? That's the question mark. It's probably well worth a few lineups or possibly, a bet on Zalatoris to finish maybe top 10. I don't think a win is something that I would go with questionable health, especially with all of those guys at the top he'd have to beat. But Zalatoris is someone who I'm certainly considering for some sprinkles. Brian Harman, just a better golfer than the salary indicates. His irons have not been particularly good lately, which is why I'm not higher on Harman than I used to be higher on Harman. Now I'm not quite so high on him, just because the iron play hasn't been there. He's been carrying himself with the elite short game. So kind of out on that. But Billy Horschel plays TPC Southwind well. I've kind of reached the point with Horschel where, look, I care about recent stats. I care about course fit more than course history, because course history very easily becomes dated year after year. But there are certain golfers who don't really have the skill set anymore to thrive at certain courses. And so I think for me, Billy Horschel is just one of those golfers where at the right course, I like Horschel, kind of like Bubba Watson, even though Bubba's like Billy Horschel plus in this example, but Horschel fits from that standpoint. Almost same for Ian Poulter. He's got, I think, 3 top 5s here the past 5 years, something like that. Pretty good results. And again, not too bad overall, 36th relative to this field, which in my just combination of long-term adjusted form and the stats that I'm looking at. But I mean, for him, it's the ball striking is really bad. And so that's kind of the thing with this field is right after around Harman at 87, like things drop off a lot, and you really have to make excuses, make cases for the golfers below that. And just based on what we've seen historically from no cut events, like you got to be careful with the value plays you're going after. So let me pull up the official World Golf rankings here quickly. Let me see if I can do this on the fly. Let's do the past like 50 of the WGCs. So this is the match play that Billy Horschel won. Speaking of, but these are like the winners of recent WGCs. Morikawa, JT, Reed, Rory, Brooks, Kisner at the match play, so that's different. DJ, Xander, JT, Bubba at the match play, Phil, Justin Rose, Hideki, DJ, like you're probably not going to find a long shot winner. And so the more value golfers you put into your lineup, the fewer chances you have of hitting the winner realistically. That's not to say that the optimal lineup or some of the winning lineups won't have value plays, but like that more balanced build, I think, is going to be crucial for this week. Question from Salvator: suggestion on players to start build with. So I would say my like core plays for this week are going to be Brooks, which I will not be alone in. He is the favorite, and he also is the highest salary golfer. My research has shown that combination is pretty much a guarantee that you're going to be the chalkiest golfer in the field. Jordan Spieth as well counts, but somehow I actually have not gotten to this guy here, Daniel Berger, 22-1, 10,900. So Berger is someone who I think is like undersalaried. He's got 2 wins here. Again, 2016, 2017, before this was the WGC, but like, yeah, not all of his stats are green. But 95th percentile adjusted irons, which again, the most important stat for this week. Good driver, very, very nice stat there. 69th percentile. And someone who like, he's not super long off the tee, but he doesn't have to be this week. So I think a lot sets up well for Berger. But then I would also say Harris English is a core play for me. Like, I would not be surprised if his salary came out at like 9,600. I think that savings is, I'm not saying he should be 10,100 instead of 9,100, but like that goes a long way separating between, that can get you back up to someone like a Brooks Koepka or someone like a Spieth. So I would say my 3 key plays, probably Brooks or Spieth, kind of a coin flip there. But then Daniel Berger and Harris English, I should probably say, are my 2 core plays. From there, I can be a little bit more persuaded one way or the other. But Berger, I think everything sets up well for him this week. I'm going to end things quickly by looking at my win simulations just to see if there's betting value. Honestly, I'm not in love with this week from a betting standpoint. Just the way that things like kind of shake out. Xander's the most likely to win. This does not account for things like, I think Xander's probably jet lagged and not that engaged. This is just a data focused simulation of what we should expect. So I'm kind of out on Xander. Morikawa's second up. He's kind of overvalued. So is Spieth, but I'm okay with Spieth because I think Xander, Morikawa, after their close runs, or Xander's win, but Morikawa almost getting a medal. I would say Spieth probably has just naturally an increased win rate there. DJ, I think, is intriguing. Hovland was at the Olympics. Cantlay hasn't been quite himself, but honestly, it's kind of tough read again, under salaried probably, but traveling back. So my favorite bets for this week probably going to be Spieth, Daniel Berger, and then Jason Kokrak as well, who does rate out as a negative value, but I kind of would nitpick the guys who are rating out as positive expected values, such as Harman. Connors, I think, is a good play. For an outright, possibly. Again, I show the list of WGC winners. You're just gonna have a hard time justifying long shots. But for a top 10, I would say Corey Connors makes a lot of sense. But from an outright standpoint, I think Daniel Berger is like the one guy I'm settling in on most. But that's going to do it for me. Tom is ready to go. Talking about MLB, as always, I have a lot to learn when it comes to this point on Tuesday. I just sit back and listen and figure out who I got to play. So Tom, give me like a 1-sentence overview of what I need to know for tonight.
So for tonight's slate, we are expecting a little bit of rain at Coors Field, which obviously complicates things for, potential hitting stacks. I would certainly look to the Yankees and the White Sox as some high upside stacks. The Tigers are a bit sneaky. And then, potentially taking a shot with Dylan Cease as a pitcher outside of Zach Wheeler, who, of course, is the number 1 option on tonight's slate.
All right. I'm going to inject that right into my lineups, and I'm going to sit back and listen to what else you have to say.
All right, so let's jump into the 4 p.m. MLB Q&A. Again, I will be here all week because Jim Sanas is out. He is alive. He is well and healthy. Just a quick recap on some of this weather that I mentioned earlier on the podcast. I just touched on it briefly there. The Chicago Cubs at Colorado Rockies game. Again, this update is from Kevin Roth, the best meteorologist for DFS. Scattered storms tonight, gradually winding down as we approach midnight local time. Can't tell you if the storms will be over the stadium or not around game time. All I can say is there's a chance for any and all outcomes. Colorado has been historically very patient with these kind of games, so I think they'll find a way to play this or not. That's what Kevin Roth is saying. Again, it's just 4 p.m. Eastern time right now, so we could be getting an update later and closer to lock. So we do have some confirmed starting lineups. I'll hop on over to the lineup page. We'll go through some hitters. I'll start off with the home run call. So earlier today during the podcast, I mentioned Eric Haas as my home run call going up against Garrett Richards. I wrote about Haas today on numberFire.com, really liking some of the numbers he has. The second home run call I have today is going to be Adam Duvall for the now Atlanta Braves being traded from the Marlins to the Braves at the end of last week. We look to Adam Duvall's splits versus lefties. He's going up against John Lester, who's now on the St. Louis Cardinals. And yes, Duvall strikes out a ton at a 35.5% strikeout rate, which is terrible. That's just bad for an MLB hitter, but he has a very solid 207 ISO. He's coming in with a massive 51.9% fly ball rate in this split, along with a 37.0% hard contact rate. Those numbers are absolutely phenomenal. A 51% fly ball rate puts him in a spot to hit a home run really in any matchup that he has. And we look to Lester, who's allowing over 2 home runs per 9 to righties this year. That's absolutely terrible. Obviously, never been a big strikeout pitcher. He's not allowing a massive amount of fly balls, but he's still getting burned by them with an 18.3% rate. So Adam Duvall will be my second home run call on tonight's slate. Let's jump into some questions. Salvator from YouTube saying Pete Alonso and the Orioles stack was on point last night. Yeah. Like I was saying, like Andrew Heaney last night is that pitcher that has shown a great strikeout rate, and he has a 28.2% rate, coming into yesterday, and that was great. But he's also allowing, way too many home runs to righties, and we saw one from Ryan Mountcastle, and we saw one from I think Cedric Mullins hit one, Austin Hayes hit one. Like they really showed through, and that's what we want to be always looking for, like that home run upside, really pushing your lineups to the top of leaderboards. Jerry is asking Votto and Devers home run call. I'm on board with both of them. Like, it's not like we're going to be too afraid of it's Rodriguez. Who's it? Wandy Peralta is pitching. Who's pitching for Detroit again? It's Peralta, right? Willie Peralta, for Detroit. I think that's fine. Kenta Maeda is pitching for the Minnesota Twins tonight, going up against the Reds for Joey Votto. I think you can certainly be looking to him as well. I kind of like the Reds tonight as a stack that's not getting mentioned too much. Kyle is asking what Giants are best for a stack tonight. I'm going to be on board with the Giants again tonight just because they are in a good spot. Let me bring up another page here. I already got some teams pulled up. Again, they're going up against Madison Bumgarner, a pitcher that has certainly been struggling this year. And, some of the stats and the underlying metrics that he has are some of the worst of his career. And that's not something that he has historically shown. For me, I'd be looking to Ruff, Posey, even Crawford in the lefty-lefty split is something you could be going to. It drops a little bit off of there. Yastrzemski really does have the splits that we'd like to see, combined with the fact that they are a little bit shorthanded in their lineup still because they're dealing with some injuries. I don't think Lamonte Wade Jr. is going to be in there, but we still wouldn't want him. If Flores is in there, potentially you could be looking at him. I wouldn't hate taking a shot on him, but really the top portion of their lineup, I would say Crawford, Bryant, and Posey are the main 3 Giants hitters that I'm looking for tonight. Alvin White is asking, are the Braves and the Giants the best non-Coors stacks tonight? So I'm on board with the Giants, just mentioned them. I mentioned them earlier this morning on the solo shot, so I'm on board with them. The Braves tonight have a 4.41 implied run total. That is 14th on today's slate. That's right in the mid-tier. I actually don't anticipate the Braves being that chalky tonight, and I actually really do like them, especially a lot of their righty hitters. Now, if we look at the Braves quickly, because they made a few additions at the trade deadline. Of course, we know that Freddie Freeman has some pretty neutral splits. You can be looking at him, but Austin Riley, Jorge Soler, and Adam Duvall all have big-time home run upside. They're all righties, and as I just mentioned with John Lester, he's allowing over 2 home runs, 2.09 home runs to be exact, versus righties this season. So I wrote about Duvall today on numberFire.com. He's one of my favorite home run plays that I think is going to go under the radar. And I actually think that the Braves overall are going to be going under the radar with this 4.41 implied run total. Like this is just no man's land, right? Let's just say Coors Field plays, right? That's, we have a Coors Field game on the slate. Let's just go with the assumption that Coors Field does play tonight. Yankees are up here. The White Sox, who I spoke about today, are up there. The Red Sox, I mentioned briefly. You can be certainly looking to them. And then the Blue Jays, we know they should be relatively popular. Like all these teams have the potential to be very, very high rostership percentages tonight. And I think that the Braves are going to fall a bit under the radar, and therefore I like them. So yes, pairing the Braves and the Giants are two of my favorite stacks outside of Coors Field tonight. John Rosenberg is asking, do I like Patino tonight for the, where's Tampa? Right here. Flip to this. Here's the issue that I'm having overall. He's not going super, super deep into games yet. Like we can see it trending upwards, which is good. No, there's no doubt about it that it's trending upwards. The walks are still a slight issue for him. The strikeout upside is undeniable. We have certainly seen that from him, but the combination of too many walks, a bit inconsistency when it comes to how many earned runs and how efficient he's being, and not going super deep into games has me shying away from him. So really at this lower tier of pitching, if that's where you'd be looking to go or that's where you'd want to spend down to, I would actually be going with Jose Suarez. It was only $200 more. I thought that Suarez was going to get the start yesterday for the Angels. It wasn't. It was Chris. His name's escaping me. Who was it? It was Chris. What's his name? Whoever might be from the Angels that got the start yesterday. Not that it matters too much, but he got the start yesterday. He put up a good performance. I would be looking to go to Jose Suarez today against the Rangers just because the Rangers lineup is not going to be good. We saw it from them yesterday. Their offense is struggling. Listen, their offense wasn't good to begin with, and then you remove Joey Gallo from it. I am not looking towards him. And you like the Brave stack tonight? John is also asking. Yes, I do like the Brave stack tonight. I'd be focusing in on probably Freddie Freeman, going to Adam Duvall, Jorge Soler, Austin Riley, Ozzie Albies, players of that nature, really getting some solid home run upside. I think that's all very much in play. How would you rate these stacks? Boston, this is what Jerry on Facebook is asking. How would you rate these stacks? Boston, Cincy, New York Yankees, that is, Milwaukee, and who do you favor if you like any of these? So how would I rate them? Boston, Cincy, New York, Milwaukee. So Yankees, I think, are clearly in the best spot. This is not a secret. No matter where you look on, on today's slate for whatever information you're out there searching for, you're going to see the Yankees as a very popular option. But if the Yankees are going to be super chalky tonight, there's an argument to be made for some of the other options. Like I said, going to the Reds, attacking Kenta Maeda, who's allowing 1.36 home runs per 9 this season. So while I do like the Yankees and the Red Sox tonight, I think we have to factor in all of, how chalky they're going to be, how expensive they are. So when push comes to shove, I'm going to go, I'll go Yankees, Sox, Cincy, Milwaukee, right? Because the Yankees are just truly in a phenomenal spot. You want to be going there. The Sox are also in a great spot. And then I would take Cincy. Like I think that they have plenty of power in their lineup. You can be looking to them really any single time. They're also at home in the Great American Small Park, giving you plenty of upside. Salvator on YouTube is asking thoughts on the Phillies versus Corbin. I actually have the Phillies pulled up as another team I wanted to talk about because, yes, I do like the Phillies. The Phillies are also in this range. 4.46 implied run total tonight. Really not jumping off the page, right? There are clearly teams that are ahead of them that could be that people will be prioritizing. And I think that's what makes the Phillies so interesting tonight. Now, Andrew McCutchen is on the IL. Hoskins was out of the lineup the other day. He was out of the lineup yesterday. I don't know. Oh, Hoskins is back in. We have confirmed the lineup. Let's just take a look at this real quick because I do like the Phillies tonight. That's why I pulled them up. Braves, confirmed, Cardinals, Diamondbacks, blah, blah, blah. Phillies right here. Segura, Hoskins, Harper, Realmuto, Baum, Torreyes, Herrera, Williams. Okay. This is a good lineup. Certainly be looking to some of these options. Is that Okay. So this is a good lineup. We'd love to see McCutchen, but obviously he's on the IL. Hoskins, Miller, I would certainly be going. Hoskins and Realmuto, I'd certainly be going to as some of my top overall options. Alec Baum, I'd also be looking to. The fly ball rate that we are getting from some of these hitters is very, very strong. Realistically, Corbin is struggling mightily this season. second worst on today's slate, allowing 1.82 home runs per 9 this season. Corbin, a pitcher that I've trusted way too many times this year. I had him on my season-long keeper team. Obviously, that did not turn out too well. 2.16 home runs per 9 allowed this season to right-handed hitters. He has a low 15.5% strikeout rate. 4.92 xFIP, absolutely terrible. His fly ball rate is a little bit lower than you'd expect for a pitcher that's giving up that many home runs, but he's a home run to fly ball ratio of 21.7 is absolutely terrible. Hard contact rate right at 35%. So yes, I do like the Phillies tonight. I'll certainly be filtering them into my lineups because again, I'm not expecting the Phillies or the Braves to be that chalky tonight compared to some of the other top teams. And we know like the Braves seemingly have this game once every other week where they go for 15 runs or whatever it is. So I have a ton of interest in the Phillies. I have a ton of interest in the Braves tonight. Jerry's also saying, I think Seattle's in another good spot in the trap game against Tampa Bay. You're saying like the trop there. I'm not super on board with the Mariners tonight. I understand why you will be going to them, just the inconsistency that we can get from Patino in there. I'm not opposed to it. It's not my favorite option, but it is there. Salvator was asking, or just top stack for GPP. Yeah, I think the Phillies would fit that definition of a great stack for GPP. Savan on YouTube is asking, do you know what happened to the free home run challenge that FanDuel was doing? I do not. That would be a question probably best directed for customer service on Twitter. Alvin is asking, process kind of question, what stack types do you use the most? This is a great question. So we did an article, or I should say Kenyatta Store and one of our writers on numberFire did an article, I would believe was at the beginning of last season, where he went back and looked at historically what kind of stacks perform the best. And I think that the highest scoring stack, or the stack that finished within the top 10 of lineups, was a 4-3-1 stack. So 4 players from one team, 3 from the next, and then a one-off from a third team. And that one-off, I always make sure that one-off is a player that like has home run upside on his own. And what I like to say is like that player can reach value on his own. So you wouldn't be taking like Carter Keyboom as a one-off necessarily. Like he's a player that you would want if you were to happen to be stacking the Nationals. Not saying I'm going to be doing that tonight, but you would use him in a stack for him to reach his maximum upside, where he gets on base, someone else knocks him in, maybe he drives in a run because the Nationals are having a great game, not just him specifically. So a great one-off would be a player that has big upside, big home run upside on their own. So you could look to Bryce Harper, you could look to Pete Alonso, you could look to Aaron Judge, you could look to Vlad Guerrero as a one-off. Like when I do 4-3-1, that's the player I want as a one-off. So I go to a 4-3-1 stack and a 4-4 stack. That's essentially the only 2 types of stacks that I use. Every now and then I'll mix in a 4-2-2 stack, 4 players from one team, 2 from another, and then 2 from a third team. So that's a great question. What do I go with when it comes to actually building lineups? And it's generally 4-4 and 4-3-1 is the 2 main stacks. DJ on Facebook's asking, start Cueto tonight. I actually really like Johnny Cueto tonight, or Kikuchi tonight. Also start Lorenzo Cain versus Pittsburgh. I'm on board with Milwaukee as a stack overall. They're certainly up here when it comes to their implied run total. Milwaukee right here. We have confirmed lineups. Kane in the 8th spot, really not. That's dipping a little bit further down in the Milwaukee lineup than I'd be really willing to go. Eduardo Escobar, we know, hit a home run last night. He has plenty of home run upside on his own. Adames also has upside. Avisel Garcia also has some upside. So we're looking at a few $100s of difference for some of these players, and we're looking at Garcia or Adames, who has significantly more home run upside than Lorenzo Cain. So there'd be no reason for me to like go out of my way to roster Lorenzo Cain. Next up, how do I feel about Henderson tonight? That is the pitcher Henderson tonight, if that's what you're asking. Right? This is from Jason on Facebook. Which Henderson are you asking about? If you'd be a little more specific tonight, that'd be great. And then while we're waiting, DJ's asking, is Hauser worth a start against Pittsburgh? He's not necessarily the type of pitcher that I target due to the fact that we will see he has a very low strikeout percentage, right? He's not striking out a whole lot of hitters. So you'd be looking for him to go 6 innings and pick up the win, get the QS where, you need a couple of factors to go in his favor where, his fantasy point value comes from the fact that he could go 6 innings and give up 1 earned run just because he keeps the ball down. He's a ground ball pitcher, not a big strikeout pitcher. So he's generally not the kind of pitcher I target too often. I did say I was in fan of Eric Lauer yesterday, who was in the same matchup against Pittsburgh, but it's a little bit of a different story when we're dealing with a 7-game slate compared to 15, where there are other options that you could be looking at. Savannah's asking favorite picks for a single entry. I'd be looking to the Braves and the Phillies as 2 solid teams that are probably not going to be as popular as some of the chalkier teams on tonight's slate. I think they're very, very interesting when it comes to tournaments. And then I'm really looking towards Tyler Mahle at $7,900 as a pitcher that I really want to be targeting tonight, because looking at the strikeout rates for the pitchers tonight, Ohtani's not pitching tonight, but Zach Wheeler, number 1, 29.8%. Dylan Cease, and then Tyler Mahle at 28.2%. Mahle is $7,900, and Zach Wheeler's all the way up at $10,700. Right? We're talking about a few percentage points difference here, and Mahle is significantly cheaper. So I really like him tonight. I like the over on his strikeout prop sitting at 6.5. That's where I would go. Julius Caesar is asking unusual stacks on tonight's slate, and then a mid-level pitcher. So I think Tyler Mahle kind of fits that mold of a mid-level pitcher. Blake Snell, he still has that high strikeout rate, but the walks are just way, way too much for Blake Snell this season. Not a spot I'd be going. Taijuan Walker at $7,400. I know he's had a really, really rough stretch in a lot of these recent games. He was cruising in the first half of the season, but he's up against Miami tonight, which I do think is a good bounce back spot for him. So if there's really any time for Walker to get things going tonight, it would be against Miami. So he'd be a pitcher I'd be willing to take a few shots in the mid-tier with, but really like 9 times out of 10, I'm going to be going towards Tyler Mahle for that 28% strikeout rate, really giving you a boost. And then unusual stacks as the second part of the question. I mean, there's unusual stacks on tonight's slate. Like, I don't want to say the Braves fit that mold, but for me, it might be the Tigers. Now, I mentioned the Tigers briefly this morning as kind of a fourth stack that I like. And if they aren't going to be popular, this is a stack that I think we can be going to. This is a stack that has plenty of home run upside, a stack that has and the players in the stack that are generating tons of fly balls. And more importantly, they are going up against Garrett Richards, who is right here, allowing too many home runs this year, 1.42, has a low 17.3% strikeout rate and a 9.7% walk rate. This is a pitcher that similarly fits the mold of Chris Bubich tonight, the pitcher for the Royals, who I spoke about this morning in terms of the Chicago stack, a pitcher that walks too many hitters, has a low strikeout rate, which means if they get in a jam, they're really not pitching themselves out of trouble, right? They rely on ground balls. They rely on, flyouts to get themselves out of innings. And all of these walks are only in favor of the other team, combined with the home runs that we are seeing Garrett Richards allowing. So the Tigers are kind of the team that I'm also targeting as a bit of an under-the-radar stack. We have seen their implied run total creep up a bit throughout the day. I also mentioned it earlier on the podcast that I like the Tigers-Red Sox game for a game stack specifically because we already know that the Red Sox are in a good spot. We have certainly seen their pitchers regress in the second half of the season and their bullpen regress a little bit. And then we look to the Tigers, and then we look to the Red Sox as already a great stack. That we just have plenty of power in their lineup to begin with. So I'd be looking to the Red Sox and the Tigers. Sal is saying he likes the 4-3-1 stacks. Absolutely. Eric on YouTube is saying, new to this, for single entry, have a 4-1 stack. Boston, Philly, Chicago White Sox, New York Yankees, Milwaukee, strong projections down. Okay, are you saying a 4-1 stack as in a 4 and then 1-1-1-1? Is that where you're going with? Because because like that's totally a viable Corbin option. You know, you have your core stack of 4, and then you're taking 4 players as one-offs. Again, the players that I like to target as one-offs are all who have home run upside, right? A player getting on base, you know, a player having a single or a double and like 1 RBI, like at the end of Eric is saying, yes, so 4, 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay, so at the end of the day, like a player, he has a single, he has 1 RBI, he has a run, like what's that doing for you at the end of the day in tournaments, right? Like that doesn't jump you to the top of leaderboards. Like a player having like 9, 10, 11 fantasy points, like cool, like that's great. You want home run upside, right? The hope, like we don't want to be min cashing, right? You want to be jumping up to the top of the leaderboard. So if you have your core stack, you're going with let's say a Boston core stack. It's the first team listed. Boston core stack, great. So for Philly, who is that player that has home run upside? Now, of course, you have to work with the salaries, make this all work, but Hoskins has some home run upside tonight. You could certainly be looking to him. Hoskins has some home run upside. You know, maybe if they run Corbin out of the game early, like Harper could have, some run at their bullpen. So that's perfect. From the White Sox, really like Jose Abreu and Andrew Vaughn tonight. You could be going there. From the Yankees, plenty of their hitters are in good spots. It comes down to how many of them you can afford. And then for Milwaukee, I'd be willing to run it back with Eduardo Escobar, who had a home run last night. Avisel Garcia, you could be looking at him. Joey Gallo is not overly expensive at only $3,500. So yes, the 4-1-1-1-1 stack is certainly viable for Corbins. Get that core stack nailed down that you are just super, super confident in, whatever it might be. You know, Boston tonight, and then take those home run upside. That's what you want. You want home run upside. You know, rostering, you know, Tim Anderson. I don't mean to call Tim Anderson out because he's actually one of my favorite players in the league, but he's not a player that like brings a ton of power. Like he can steal a base. He can have like 2-3 runs, a couple RBIs, and stolen base, which is great. But really, when it comes down to it, like Jose Abreu has multi-home run upside. Jose Abreu can have 2 home runs and 5 or 6 RBIs. So that's what you really want, right? Like Tim Anderson getting on base is great. And being a part of a larger White Sox stack is great. And I know for a fact I'm going to have plenty of shares of the White Sox and Tim Anderson tonight. But Jose Abreu, Pete Alonso, Aaron Judge, Devers, whoever mentioned that before, those type of hitters, that's what brings you the home run upside. That's what boosts you to the top of leaderboards. So Eric is also saying for Cease's pitcher, yes, I like Cease a lot tonight. That'd be great. Savannah is saying Yankees scared me yesterday. I don't want to touch them again. I like Philly, Milwaukee, and Detroit tonight. Thanks, Tom, for the insight. Well, thanks for being here. Yes, so the Yankees just complete dud last night. There's no other way to put it, right? They just completely fell flat. But they are in a good spot tonight, right? Whatever they did yesterday, or I should say, not what they did, what they didn't do yesterday, the lack of scoring runs yesterday. Whatever they did yesterday does not matter today. It's like we don't want to have this recency bias where, you know, like they did terrible yesterday, so now like we can't roster them today. Well, it's like it's a different pitcher today, and they're still just like factually in a good spot, going up against Alexander Wells, going up against this Baltimore bullpen potentially. So I understand like the frustrations of having that, but like if the Yankees scored 10 runs yesterday, you know, would you be running back to play them today because they went crazy yesterday? It's like, well, we'd still be playing them today because they're just in a good spot today. DJ is saying Rockies might get postponed. Yes, that's one of the things we have to worry about. As I'll always say, follow Kevin Roth on Twitter. We're waiting for this another weather update because this is impactful, right? Wind blowing in, rain throughout the entirety of the game, and it's like a good chance that we could be seeing a lot of rain. So that is something that we have to be focusing in on. Salvator is saying Adames and Mancini gave me zeros last night. I know. I was big on Mancini. I was big on Willie Adames. I have Adames on my season-long team. Not getting the week off started on the best foot. Sorry, what is a Coors stack? So are you saying a Coors stack as in the Coors Field in Colorado, or a Coors stack like Core, like this is the main team that I am trusting today, or the main team that I'm going with? Because like a Coors stack would be like you want to be overweight on the field when it comes to the Red Sox or the White Sox, like 2 teams. So that's your core stack. So I guess maybe like I haven't spoken like too much about my process because like, Jim obviously has been here the whole season, but like a lot of what I do when it comes to a slate, and this is a good way to like break things down for like what kind of stacks you to look at, like a 4-4 stack or 4-3-1 stack, whatever it might be, is like I essentially break things down into like two like pools or tiers or whatever you want to call it, Group A, Group B. So like Group A, like stacks tonight for me would be like the Yankees, the Giants, the White Sox, the Red Sox, and maybe Coors Field. So like these are like Group A teams, like or like Pool A teams. And then like Pool B teams would be teams like the Phillies or the Braves or the Angels. I do think the Angels are in a good spot. I spoke about them this morning on the solo shot, attacking Jordan Lyles. We absolutely want to do that. So like the Pool A teams are probably going to be like super chalky teams. We know that they're going to be popular. We know that they're in a great spot. All these things are very, very clear. So I'll be looking to the Yankees, but then I'll take like the Yankees, and it comes down to, using a lineup optimizer if you're multi-entering. I'll take the Yankees, and you're pairing them off with like a team like the Phillies or the Tigers or whoever it might be, or the Angels, not only because I'm trying to get a good combination. I do think the Angels are in a great spot, but more importantly, their salaries make sense together, right? So it's like I'm pairing the Yankees with the Angels, and then I'll pair the Yankees with the Phillies, and the Yankees with the Braves, as long as their salaries work. And then I'll look to take the White Sox and pair the White Sox with the Angels, the White Sox with the Braves. So when like those teams take care of what they should at the top tier, when like the Angels go crazy, all of the lineups with the Angels are like rising together. So the Angels and the Yankees are rising, the Angels and the White Sox are rising. So I basically break things down into like two different pools of teams, like the top tier teams, and then like these teams I think that are kind of under the radar and a bit undervalued. So like the Orioles last night. So when the Orioles go off and have 4 or 5 home runs, they boost all of the lineups together. Diffuse on YouTube is asking Gary Sanchez tonight. Is he confirmed in the lineup? I'm not sure if we had a Yankees. We do. Sanchez is in the lineup. I'm on board with the Yankees tonight. I'm totally on board with them. I know I'm going to be stacking them. I probably, Gleyber Torres was on a bit of a hot streak. He certainly cooled off after their series in Miami. I probably only stack the top 6 of the Yankees tonight. I probably go through like in the optimizer and like remove spots 7, 8, 9 from the optimizer and say do not stack hitters from these spots. Stick to the top portion. That's generally where we will see the chalkiest options. Not just for the Yankees, but just in most stacks every single day. We generally see 1 through 4, 2 through 5 as the chalkiest options. It obviously presents the opportunity to do a bottom half of the lineup stack or a wraparound stack to be a little bit different in tournaments, which is of course obviously a great thing. You learned about Coors term yesterday from Eric. Yeah, Colorado, Coors Field. A Coors Field slate is always interesting because the run potential in that stadium is obviously massive. And, sometimes you don't want to be left behind. Obviously, tonight's a little bit different because we're dealing with so much weather concern here, which hopefully we'll get an update from Kevin Roth prior to 7 p.m. lineup. I will say, if you are playing stacks at Coors Field tonight, because obviously the game does not start until, 8:40, so an hour and 40 minutes after lock, give or take. You got to be ready. You got to be ready to swap if this game gets postponed or delayed, right? You got to be on board. You got to be ready, like at your computer, on your phone, whatever it might be, if this game gets postponed, because you don't want those dead lineups out there, right? Make sure you get those swaps out there. That is, of course, a major, major thing to pay attention to on tonight's slate. All right. So, I think we are in a fantastic spot. Obviously a much better slate than we had yesterday with only 7 games, a full 15 games tonight. There are some great pitching options on tonight's slate. I think that we're going to see a lot of runs tonight. I think this is a great spot for multi-entering. Last question, producer Cal is asking, Tom, I have an average of $3,320 left. If Coors gets postponed, where should I go? So that, of course, is information we don't have, but the Angels, their lineup, as we see here, outside of Ohtani, who is really just in a fantastic spot tonight. He's probably my favorite overall hitter, but some of these players are very, very affordable. I have a ton of interest in Justin Upton tonight at $2,700. I wrote about him today as one of my potential home run calls on numberFire.com. You can find all my writing there. So if you are pivoting away from Coors Field, Ohtani makes sense because you can shift some of that salary very easily. Max Stassi is not expensive at all. And then Justin Upton under $3,000 in this matchup against Jordan Lyles is phenomenal. All right, so I'll take this one last question. Eric is asking, is ceiling important when using things like Fantasy Cruncher along with fantasy point projection? Ceiling is always important. If whatever sources you're using, you can look at like range of outcome projections. Ceiling, of course, is important. That's ultimately what you're shooting for. Again, you don't want a hitter to just get a single or double and one RBI and one run. Like, that's great and all, but it's not like the 30 points that can push you towards the top of the leaderboard. So yes, absolutely look towards ceiling. Don't just like look at ceiling and say, oh, this is the end all and be all. Factor that in within the stack and within, the context of your lineups. All right, so that does it for today's Q&A. I'll be back tomorrow morning for the solo shot at 9 a.m. right here on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook page. You can follow me on Twitter at DFS_Tom. Until next time, good luck in your contests.